Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tragic Hollywood Star of the Week. This week, we're going to be looking at the tragic and very short life of the bombastic, one of the last of the blonde bombshells, Jayne Mansfield. So let's get to it. Hi, everyone, and happy 4th of July. This week's Star of the Week is the tragic Jayne Mansfield. Jayne is in my book, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead. She's in the first book. She was one of the blonde bombshells from the 1950s whom life wasn't very nice to, and due to her own poor choices mostly, but also just due to circumstances of the day. And she ended tragically dying at the age of, I think, 34 in 1967 in a horrendous car accident, which people still talk about today. So we'll get into her life story in a minute. But if you like my content, please like and subscribe, hit the notification button. Also, please check out my books on Amazon, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Still Dead, and my novel, Goodbye, Angel, Goodbye. I think that if you like the golden age of Hollywood, you'll really love the books. So let's get into Miss Jayne Mansfield. She's been in the news a lot lately because her daughter, Mariska Hargitay, who's famously on Law and Order Special Victims Unit for decades now, is actually made a biography, a documentary about her mother, and it was released this week on HBO or Max, whatever they're calling it these days. So she's kind of been in the news a lot. People have been talking about her. Mariska. This documentary kind of omits a lot of bad things about Jayne and kind of fluffs up the good things about her because it's her daughter. But Mariska never knew Jayne. She was in the car when the horrendous accident happened. And apparently, according to the documentary, if it hadn't been for her older brother Zoltan asking, "Where's Maria?" Initially, this was Mariska's name, Maria. "Where's Maria?" They didn't even know she was in the car. They had to go all the way back to the scene of the accident, and she was tucked under the front seat. And they found her that way. She didn't suffer very many, just minor injuries. These kids all just suffered minor injuries, while Jayne, her current boyfriend, Sam Brody, and the young kid who was driving the car, whose name escapes me, all were killed instantly in this car accident. We'll talk about it later. But Jayne was born in 1933 in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Her father was a lawyer and her mother was a school teacher. So she grew up in a little bit of an upper middle class. It would have been upper middle class, but her father, coincidentally, died in a car accident when he was very young. I think he was the same age she was. And she was in the car when this accident happened. So I think it was probably right before, it was still in the 1930s. I think she was only 3 years old when this happened. So 1936, I guess. Jayne was smart. She often claimed that she had an IQ of 164. She never produced proof of this, however. That's a really, really high IQ. But she was no dummy. She was a violin prodigy. She also played the piano, a musical prodigy, I guess you would say. She was very, very good at what she did. So when she was younger, a child, this was encouraged in her. But as soon as her boobs popped out and her waist got cinched with a corset, that was it. It was all about her looks. It was all about furthering her career. She married the first drooling high school boy that came along. His name was Paul Mansfield. She liked that name, so she kept it. But as soon as they went on a trip to LA, she never went back, basically. That was it. She was determined that she was going to make it in show business, so she never went back. They did have a daughter, Jane Marie, and this is the child that knew Jayne Mansfield the best. She was raised by Jayne Mansfield until Jayne Mansfield's death. And this occurred when Jane Marie was about 16 years old. So I thought if anybody should have made a documentary about Jayne Mansfield, should have been Jane Marie. But Jane Marie had a lot of mixed feelings about her mother. She even says in this documentary, I wasn't around her when she was in a bad mood. I made sure that I was somewhere else when she was in a bad mood. So there's other things about that we'll talk about a little later. But like I said, Jayne enrolled in UCLA. She wasn't really very serious. She mostly just wanted to make connections. She divorced her husband because he realized she wasn't going to go back to Pennsylvania. So she divorced him. He divorced her, whatever. She began appearing in, all these. I'm going to read you a few of these beauty contests that she was appearing in. Miss Fine Prevention Week, Gas Station Queen, Miss Angelesian, Cherry Blossom Queen, Miss Third Platoon, Miss Blues Bonnet of Austin, Miss Direct Mail, Miss Electric Switch, Miss Filler Up, Miss Negligee, Nylon Sweater Queen, Miss One for the Road, Miss Freeway, Hot Dog Ambassador, Miss Geiger Counter, Best Dressed Woman of Theater, Miss 100% Pure Maple Syrup, Miss July 4th. Oh, how appropriate. And on with these just little tiny things. And she would, she would do just about anything for publicity. Jayne was known to be a publicity whore. She would do anything for publicity. Since she had a daughter, her daughter was forced to go on all of these publicity shoots. Once she did a publicity shoot where she posed in a mink bikini on the beach, and everybody loved that. But what really put her on the map, she didn't break into the movies right away. What she did was she broke into the theater, and she did a play called Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, in which she did a pretty shameless ripoff of a Marilyn Monroe imitation in this play. And the play was hugely successful. Jayne Mansfield became an overnight sensation in this play. She was everywhere. And suddenly, Hollywood came knocking on Jayne Mansfield's door. And could you blame her? She was the most photographed actress of that time, and that includes Elizabeth Taylor and all the other big actresses of the 1950s. She was hot stuff. She had a 40-inch bust, 24-inch waist when she was wearing her corset, and she did practice corset training. 36 to 37-inch hips. She was beyond curvaceous. Okay, she was really something else. So of course, Hollywood came knocking. In 1956, she starred in a rather groundbreaking movie for its day. It was called The Girl Can't Help It, and it featured some of early rock's biggest stars. It combined early rock music, and this is 1956, with kind of a jiggle TNA little put together, and Jayne Mansfield was stunning in this movie. Not really that crude, actually, shockingly. And I mean, it's had Little Richard in it and a whole bunch of early rock stars. The pioneers of rock and roll essentially were in this movie. It was a really good movie. And Fox saw her in this movie, and they bought her Broadway contract out. She'd been touring with her second husband, whom she met on Broadway, by the way. His name was Mickey Hargitay. He was a bodybuilder, and he was a nice guy and probably very good for Jayne. Probably the one good thing in her life was Mickey Hargitay. She got a contract with Fox after she made The Girl Can't Help It, and then they starred her in the movie version of the Broadway play that she was the best known in, which is Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and that was a very successful movie. So she was big stuff, and she was on her way. She wasn't just second banana to the other big blonde bombshell, Marilyn Monroe. I might also add she was far less trouble on the set than Marilyn Monroe had become. She was on time, she knew her lines, she was smart, she could actually act, and if she'd ever been given half a chance to act, she probably would have done a good job. Notice she never really took an acting class, however. I'm often baffled by these women who claim that they want to be taken seriously in their craft, yet they never bother to actually learn their craft. And this is where Marilyn Monroe set herself apart. She actually went to the actor's studio and bothered to learn how to act. So that she gained my respect when she did that. Mansfield, she didn't care. She was in it for the Jaguars and the furs. She said that. She wanted the money. Luckily for her, her grandfather was rather well off. And when he died, he left her $90,000, which was close to $1 million in today's money. $90,000 was a lot of money in the 1950s. She took that money and she bought what's known today as the Pink Palace, a beautiful mansion in Beverly Hills that was pink on the outside and also pink on the inside because Jayne Mansfield made sure it was pink. Here's some photos to just let you know what this thing looked like. It was hideous. I'm sorry. It was campy hideous. And the weird thing is Jayne Mansfield's favorite color wasn't pink, but she felt it was a great eye-catching signature color. So she leapt onto pink, and that was her signature color after that, even though she wasn't that fond of pink. So go figure. She'll do anything for publicity. Remember, this is Jayne Mansfield we're talking about. I'm going to read you a little bit from my book, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead, on the chapter on Jayne Mansfield. Jayne's over-the-top mannerisms mimicked her over-the-top lifestyle, which she happily shared with the entire world. No shy, reclusive star here, folks. Just a huge publicity whore willing to do absolutely anything to keep her name in the papers. She invited cameras into her pink mansion in the hills of Benedict Canyon, which she had bought with her inheritance money, complete with heart-shaped pool, pink heart-shaped bed, and a pink heart-shaped tub nestled inside a bathroom that had been covered from wall to ceiling in pink carpet. There was usually a pink poodle wandering around as well. In case you're still in the dark, pink was Jayne's signature color. So that gives you an idea of Jayne and her love, or her pretend love, or her faux love for pink. Okay, so she made a couple of movies that did really well, and then guess what? Things didn't go so well for her, and her career began to slide because people got tired of her, to be quite honest. She was everywhere. She would do anything to keep her name in the papers, and she wasn't getting the kind of roles that would have furthered her career. Those roles were going to other blondes like Marilyn Monroe, like Lauren Bacall, like other blonde bombshells and not blonde bombshells. Elizabeth Taylor was getting a lot of roles that she could have probably played well. She was never the muse of a director or a famous writer, like Tennessee Williams absolutely adored Elizabeth Taylor, and that's why she was in a lot of the really good films based on Tennessee Williams plays, like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and Suddenly Last Summer. Jayne didn't have this advantage. She never captured the attention of a director who thought she was particularly anything special other than some jiggle-diggle. She eventually had to just accept whatever came her way. Here's another little tidbit from my book, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead. Jayne certainly achieved her goal of the little mother. She had 5 kids. I think she had three by Mickey Hargitay, except that in this recent documentary, Mariska found out that Mickey Hargitay was not her father. It was an Italian singer that her mother had an affair with while she was touring in Italy. So 2 from Mickey Hargitay, 1 from her first husband, and another one from her third husband that she was married to for, I think, a hot minute, and then divorced him. And that was right before she got with her lawyer, Sam Brody. Anyway, my book continues. Jayne certainly achieved her goal of the little mother 5 times over. She became this walking contradiction, letting her unruly boobs escape from their barely there restraints in one photograph, then posing with the baby in her arms and 3 at her feet in another. Fox wanted to cast her in Bell, Book, and Candle opposite James Stewart and Jack Lemmon, but she had to turn it down due to pregnancy. Big mistake. Her career was already on shaky ground, and that would turn out to be the last decent role she was offered for a long time. In 1959, she had a role in the Western, The Sheriff of Fractured Jaw, a poorly received film that had the distinction of being the first mainstream film of her career. The producers of Fractured Jaw tried to cast her in the Paul Newman comedy Rally Around the Flag Boys, but both Newman and his wife, Joanne Woodward, disliked Jayne and forced the studio to cast Joan Collins instead. Fox stopped viewing her as a major Hollywood star material and started loaning her out to foreign productions until the end of her contract in 1962. This is 5 years before her death. She was probably not even 30 years old, and they're telling her that she was washed up. So thus begins the tragedy of Jayne Mansfield. She made several very bad mistakes during the last 5 years of her life. One of them was that she decided she was going to convert to the Church of Satan, and she got together with Anton LaVey, and they did a series of photographs with her drinking the blood of Satan or whatever, and this was really not good publicity for Jayne. By this time, she was wearing her hair in the big bouffant style of the 1960s, and she was trying to transition from 50s bombshell to 60s bombshell. So her hair was teased to the max, like in a bouffant style, and she was wearing the tight little cigarette pants, which were adorable, but she seemed to be she always seemed to be trying too hard. This was Jayne's problem. She seemed to always be trying too hard. And certainly this was the case. The older that she got even more desperate. She had an obsession with Chihuahuas. You see her photographed with them all the time. She loved them. She took them everywhere she went. She loved Chihuahuas probably more than her kids. Another scandal hit her when her son Zoltan was mauled by a lion at Jungleland while she was on one of her $18 million publicity shoots. She brought him along. He was not well supervised, and he got mauled by a lion. Jayne sued the ever-loving shit out of Jungleland, and they were forced to close after that. And so here's a scandal with her son being mauled at Jungleland. Here's a scandal with Anton LaVey and the photographs of her drinking blood and becoming a member of the Church of Satan. Not a good look at this time. And, scandal after scandal. At one point, after she divorced her third husband, there was another scandal involving her daughter, her oldest daughter, Jayne Marie, who ran screaming into a Beverly Hills police station saying that her mother had encouraged her boyfriend, Sam Brody, to beat her within an inch of her life, saying, beat her harder, beat her harder. This caused Jayne to lose custody of Jayne Marie, and Jayne Marie was placed with a paternal uncle for the remainder of Jayne's life. She did participate in the documentary, but like I said, she seemed to be a bit more reluctant than the other kids. And Mariska seemed more interested in finding out why she was not Mickey Hargitay's daughter and kind of grilling the Jayne's former publicist who worked with Jayne. I think his name was Skip. He was in the documentary. He's 100 years old now. This 100-year-old man agrees to be in this documentary. And one of the first things Mariska says is, did you think that writing that my father was not Mickey Hargitay in your book, did you consider how that was going to affect my family? And this guy was like, no, sorry. And I thought that was not that cool of Mariska. Whatever. He's 100 years old. Even on, probably needed the money. She was reduced finally to appearing in supper clubs, and the movie roles just all dried up altogether. And she was reduced to trying to maintain her lifestyle and support her children by doing nightclub acts in supper clubs. and that's being kind. The word supper club is being kind. I'm going to read this part in my book. Jayne entered a period in her life that shall henceforth be called the Supper Club Nudie years, in which she would appear at nearly any supper club established and do nearly anything for money. Most of these shows were little more than striptease acts, but Jayne always referred to them as parodies. She also began appearing in regional theater productions of famous Marilyn Monroe films such as Bus Stop and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. It was while she was appearing in some Midwest dump in Bus Stop that she fell in love with her director, Matt Cimber. She informed Mickey of the situation, and he obligingly agreed to a divorce. This was a long 6 years. She married Matt in Mexico and returned home with bruises as a souvenir for her honeymoon. And this man, they fathered one child together. So that was her 5th child. He wasn't the only one to beat her. Sam Brody, her lawyer, who was in the car and died with her in that car crash, didn't just beat Jayne Marie, he beat Jayne as well. What is it with this woman? Why is she so masochistic? She had a great guy in Mickey Hargitay. And in fact, that fateful night, she called Mickey Hargitay. She called him to let him know that the kids were okay and they're sleeping in the back and they were going to drive all the way to Louisiana. So, gotta wonder why she was so self-destructive during these later years. She gained weight after the 5th child, so the straight, non-conforming shift dresses of the 1960s suited her well at that time because she was not the slim thing that she had been before with the tiny, tiny waist, because you can't have 5 kids and have a tiny, tiny waist. It changes your shape. Of course, how could it end otherwise other than in a crash and burn car accident? She was hurtling towards self-destruction, literally running full on towards self-destruction. On the evening of June 29th, 1967, Jayne had just wrapped up another highbrow, and I'm using air quotes, highbrow, striptease show at the prestigious Gus Stevens Supper Club in Biloxi, Mississippi. She, Sam, her current boyfriend, 3 or 4 chihuahuas, 3 of Jayne's children, Michael, Sultan, and Mariska, and a 20-year-old driver whose name is Ron Harrison. Okay, there we go. All piled into the borrowed 1966 Buick Electra, owned by Gus himself, for the long overnight drive to New Orleans, and scheduled local television appearance the following morning. Jayne made one final call to Mickey Hargitay, telling him not to worry, that the kids would be okay and asleep in the car in the back seat. 30 minutes outside Biloxi on Highway 90, they ran into dense fog caused by a pesticide truck spraying for mosquitoes ahead of them. Directly in front of the Buick was an 18-wheel tractor-trailer truck. When the truck entered the pesticide fog, the driver threw on his brakes because he was suddenly blinded. Unfortunately, Ron Harrison did not do the same, and the Buick smashed into the back of the semi with such force the entire top of the car was sheared off as it became wedged underneath the truck. A lot of people think Jayne Mansfield was decapitated in this accident. It's not actually true, although I think she might have had serious head trauma. She was wearing a wig. She had taken to wearing these big bouffant wigs. And when the force of the accident happened, the wig flew off of her head and flew onto the dash, and her body was thrown from the vehicle. It wasn't a pretty crash. I saw, these pictures are on the internet all over. I'm not going to post them here because some tight ass would get upset and report me to YouTube, and that's all I need because I'm demonetized from Facebook now because I posted an autopsy picture of John Carradine, which is all over the internet as well. At any rate, let's continue. The Buick was estimated to have been traveling at around 80 miles an hour. So maybe Ron was looking at Jayne and not the road. I don't know. Jayne, Ron, and Sam were killed instantly, as was at least one of the dogs. Incredibly, all 3 children survived with minor injuries. Accident photos were circulated around the world depicting what appeared to be a blonde head wedged in the windshield wipers on the dashboard of the mutilated car. Thus, a gruesome urgent legend was born. Another less well-known photo shows Jayne, her body lying on the side of the road, her head still on her shoulders but horribly crushed. The blonde head on the dash was either a wig or her actual scalp that was ripped off in the accident. Jayne was 34. I think that was about the age of her father. It was good riddance to Sam Brody. Sad for Harrison, who probably had a hard time keeping his eyes on the road while sitting next to Busty Jayne. And a tragic sayonara to the last of the screen's blonde sex bombs. Her son mentioned in the documentary that she had initially been riding in the back seat with him and his siblings, and that she had decided to put them down, lay them all down on the back seat and cover them with blankets. And he said this was the last memory he had of her, was her covering them with blankets and touching their heads so that they could sleep for the rest of the trip. And he had lamented, and he choked up at this, and he said, why couldn't she just have stayed in the back seat? Because he felt that if she had been in the back seat, she would not have died. And maybe that's true. But this accident actually caused a law to happen where they now have to have a bar. Semi-trucks have to have a bar in that area right below their bumper. It's called the Mansfield bar. That's supposed to prevent cars from going under the semi-truck like this Buick did and having the entire top of the car sheared off in the process and cutting off or mangling or killing whoever happens to be, especially in the front seat. So she caused a new law to happen, and they still have those to this day. They got these Mansfield bars. I don't know. I guess they do some good. At any rate, she died on June 29th in 1967. She left behind 5 children, her big pink mansion, which eventually was bought by Engelbert Humperdinck, and he left it nearly intact. And he even kept her piano and her furniture, but he eventually sold it. And the piano, we don't know where the piano went. After Engelbert Humperdinck sold the mansion, it was torn down. And that's kind of sad because there's a shot in this documentary of Mariska Hargitay wandering amongst the ruins of the mansion. So are those ruins still there? And what only remains of the mansion is the gates that have the M, the elaborate M in the gates. But she actually contacted Engelbert Humperdinck's publicist, I think, and she said, I'd really like to buy the piano from him if he still has it. And this was a really touching part of the documentary. She was able to get her mother's custom painted white baby grand piano back, and her husband bought it for her birthday. So I kind of cried. I gotta admit, I teared up at that part of the documentary. My take on the documentary, I already told you. I thought similar to the one where Natasha Wood did the documentary on her mother, Natalie Wood. It was heavily biased. It didn't really portray any of it left out the Anton Levy incident. It left out the Jungle Land incident. It left out the child abuse and the fact that she had Jane Marie taken away from her. It left out all of those things. A lot of Jane's quotes that were shameless were left out, but it was a love letter, and it was Mariska coming to terms with her mother, whom she had been running from that image from her mother for her whole life. She was embarrassed by Jane. She tried to go in a completely opposite direction, but she looks the spitting image of her mother. Everyone knows that she looks the spitting image of Jane, and every time I post something about Jane, someone inevitably says, oh, she looks so much like her daughter, Mariska Hargitay. Okay, anyway, so that's the sad tale of Jayne Mansfield. This video is getting really long. She's in my book, Tragic Hollywood, Beautiful, Glamorous, and Dead. Please check it out on Amazon. There's a link in the description of this channel. I thank you very much for joining me. Next week I won't be able to get a video up, but I will try to get one up the week after. Thank you so much, and please like and subscribe. Yada, you know the drill.